Well, hello and welcome to the wrap. This is a show rounding up all things Zwift from the last week: racing, events, tech, fashion, etc. You name it. We're live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. This is episode number 65 and it is October 12th, 2023. I'm Nathan Guerra and Anna Russell is sat next to me as usual virtually. I have not gotten any ice cream yet. We're going to have to solve that one as quickly as we can. Somebody said in the comments after the show that if Anna can go get her Zwift plays by heading to the US of A, Nathan, you can get our ice cream by coming to New Zealand. So we'll see how that one works out. On the show today, this is a podcast also, everybody. We are live, but you can download this as a podcast afterwards, as well as all other 64 episodes over at ZwiftCommunityLive.com on the podcast tab, or search The Wrap and Zwift on anywhere you download your podcast. You should find it pretty quickly. A little bit of announcement as well. If you haven't noticed, we're live at 11 p.m. Central Time. What time is that in New Zealand? I don't have that on the show notes. What is that?
5 p.m. So I think it's like
5
3 p.m. Australia. So for the Aussies and Kiwis, I think a little bit of a beer Friday afternoon, summertime kind of a vibe.
Gotcha. And it is actually Central Time only October 12th for another 40 minutes. So maybe I should start saying that it's actually the next day, your days, because we've always said. Anyways, what have we been up to for the last week is what we're going to be talking to. The ZRL Roundup. We'll be having a chat with Aaron Bleakley about TTTs, team time trials, because next week is going to be a team time trial in the Zwift Racing League. Aaron Bleakley, a time trial specialist. A little chatter that's been going on in the community about the UCI going to sanction an esports calendar. That's been a little bit of a rumor, but that's been going along. And so we'll also be chatting a little bit about what does that mean with my Rouge, Zwift, other entities that are out there, if that is true, or what options are there besides that in the esports space. And then, of course, there's a huge announcement yesterday. The Zwift Cog, the Zwift Click, and virtual shifting, the rumors that we talked about on the podcast early summer. Well, this is what we had found. There was little hints there, here and there, that got released that we saw in some in-game images that were buried in some files. Well, it seems that virtual shifting is the real deal, and you can get them right now. So we'll talk about that, the thoughts we have in that. Sprint technique in the Coach's Corner. We'll actually go over a little sprint that I had this past weekend in the KISS Racing League, analyze it just a little bit, talk maybe a little bit about how sprinting's changed a tad and how to play out your sprints depending on your strengths and weaknesses. And the workout of the week is getting in the zone, and it's coming from Anna. We'll talk about that as well. And then this week's fashion in the field or jersey pick, the Flamme Rouge. So we're going to take a look at that and rate it 1 to 10. So let's get right into it. What you been up to for last week, Anna?
First off, are you sick, Nathan, or have you just been using your voice a lot? You are.
I don't know. When I was, it was as soon as I got back from the gym today. I don't know. Like I got back from the gym and I went to get on the bike and I went to have a conversation. Actually, we had a conversation with Eric Schlange and Monica Schlange just a few minutes ago, just like a catch up a little bit, talking some Zwift stuff as well. And all of a sudden I was like, what is this? Frog in my throat a little bit here. So I don't know if I ate something, drank something.
I know what it is. You tell me you're on the phone with Eric Schlange, and this is why. You guys would have just been talking for what, like 2, 3, 4 hours?
No, I actually wasn't doing a whole lot of talking. Honestly, like I was like, yeah, we can have this meeting, guys, but like I'm going to be on the bike because I got to get my zone 2 in. So I wasn't talking. I was talking enough to make sure I was in zone 2.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, what have I been up to? Quite a few workouts. I've been working on my sprint, which we'll talk about in Coach's Corner. I feel like something happened in the weekend. Oh, I did like 4 hours on Zwift. I was like, I haven't done like a long ride on Zwift for a while. So I was quite looking forward to it. My gravel friend was like, do you want to come out? I was like, I actually just want to sit on my trainer. So I did, and each hour was blocked out. So I did started with an hour BL13 recon ride, which was like great recon ride, by the way. Like I think that's probably one of the best, other than the Sarah Snopin's Women's Empower Hour, run by M. Nyquist. That's also fantastic. And then I did an hour workout, and then I did an hour like draft practice with pace partners, and then my friend who I was gravel riding with messaged and was like, ugh, I decided to go on the trainer too. I'm like dying here with no motivation. And I can literally like see her house from where I am. And so I messaged her. I was like, let's just do a workout together for an hour. Like not too bad. Like it was kind of like, she's got a big mountain bike race. So it was sort of like FTP with some pushes and stuff. And so we finished off the last hour together, just being like, we can do it. So that was really fun. I started my testing at the performance lab for the carb study. And I got to say, it's probably like the grimmest start ever. Like for some reason, the night before, my daughter's just like, I'm not going to sleep tonight. And had a party from like 1 until 5. And then, so I'd had maybe like 3 hours of sleep, and the testing is fasted, and that includes coffee. So I couldn't have a coffee, and the test.
Yeah, you couldn't
VO2
have coffee. The test doesn't include coffee. It includes
No.
you can't have coffee.
I know. I needed something. And I turned up and I was like, I feel real bad. And the guy was like, don't worry, you probably won't have the fatigue affect you until the afternoon. So you should be good this morning. But I was just so demotivated. So anyway, I got on the testing. You know, you have the whole mask on. And I was like, oh, God, I just don't want to do this.
Yeah,
Anyway,
because everyone knows. Everyone puts masks on and goes to laboratories and gets tests
I'll get a
while
photo.
fasted. Well, because you know when you put the mask on, like, wait, what? The mask? Like, what's happening in my
gosh.
life?
I'm
Like, what's my life choices if I'm putting masks on while I'm fasted to then do these intense extra? Like, how did I end up here doing this?
I know. What am I doing? This is the problem where you have a job at the National Performance Centre, because then the guys upstairs in the labs are like, hey, Anna, we've got a new study. Do you want to come do it? I'm like, okay. Anyway, so that was pretty hard.
I want to give a quick shout out. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in chat and some I haven't seen in quite a while. So Reese over at Coalition, good to see you. Mark Middleton, Mike Templeton. Aaron obviously is hanging out there. WT, just and on the rivet. Interesting to see all the some familiar faces and some I haven't seen in a while. So that's pretty cool with the new time. Just wanted to shout that out quick.
Sorry, nobody. Can you go upstairs? Okay. Not right now. Sorry. This is the time that's, for me, is a bit tricky with kids running around. I don't know how that one escaped from upstairs. Anyways, and then, of course, we had ZRL. So that was super fun. I think we just had awesome tactics. Should we do what you've been up to, and then we'll go into like a ZRL roundup?
Yeah,
I'm gonna just sort out a little child.
What have I been doing here? So I've been KISS 100. I'm really like preparing majorly for the Zwift Grand Prix. Still haven't done an announcement. I'm hoping that we get the clothing here and some of the setup stuff prior to the start of ZGP. But it doesn't, I get a lot of questions like, who are you riding for? I'll let you guys know probably by the start of next week. But I've been on a rest week now, but over the weekend was like the final push. And so I've been doing kind of that really familiar, I think, to a lot of people who are used to a pretty structured training plan. When you're doing your like final base layer, 2 kind of intensity days a week, 1 a VO2, 1 a threshold type effort. And then on top of that, just massive amounts of volume. And so I did a 3-week build of volume. The last one was 25 hours. So this past week on weekend, it was like an 8 or 9 hour. I kind of stacked the front end of the week. So you ever do a big base and you're like, I don't want the weekend to be absolute torture. So you try stacking the front end as much as you possibly can. So that's what I did this past week. And then I only, in quotes, had to get in like 9 or 10 hours over the weekend. So what I did is I had to do my critical power test, right, on Saturday to get ready for Zwift Grand Prix. So I was like, well, I'm going to kind of rest in quotes during volume. We actually asked the guys at Zada, or the people who look at this, like, can you be fatigued in doing this? Because I'm super fatigued. And like, and they were like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. But totally failed my 2 minutes so badly because I did what I expected. And then it just had to stop pedaling. It was so bad. Anyways, I did that plus the KISS race for my intensity day. And then the next day I've been trying to raise my zone 2 as high as I can. I don't know if it's just a laggy heart rate from the massive volume or if my zone 2 has actually gone up that much. But my goal has been kind of like this 300 watt zone 2. And I think I pushed it probably more like a mid zone 3 for the last hour or so of this 4.5 hour ride or so, or 3.5 hour ride. But it was like 300 watts by the end. So I was pretty happy about that. So, yeah, so that's what I've been up to. Massive amounts of volume. And now I'm just resting. And we got right to the edge. We pushed it. I mean, remember we've talked about that, about like when do you rest or when don't you rest, and getting to the edge of that cliff and not jumping off the cliff. This thing that you're hearing might be me almost going over the cliff, but I don't feel sick, but I've like felt like I could get sick. You know what I mean?
You've put in the rappelling equipment. You've set yourself up. You're about to jump off. You kind of hold in the rope.
Yeah. I'm right on that edge, and I'm really glad. Like, we took the rest week when we needed to, for sure. But I've also added in lifting, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but for me, I can almost like hit it on the dot that if I lift too hard when I first start lifting, I get sick pretty quick too.
Nathan,
Like I've noticed that.
how long have we been talking on a podcast? And you say, do you ever get that with lifting? I don't even go to the gym. I can
We
maybe
gotta
get a
fix
playground
this.
workout in.
I don't know what's
Oh my God.
playground workouts. Oh man. So anyways, that's what I've been up to. ZRL Roundup. Let's get on to what did you think of this ZRL? I had a blast on this past weekend. Temples and Towers. For those that are not familiar with and didn't do the Zwift Racing League, we were on Temples and Towers. The points were only available over the top of Rooftop, which is in Yokio, which is kind of a flatter, steady climb. And then you have the castle, which is also kind of a, like up front, it's a little sharp, but kind of, and then just steady, and then a flat sprint at the end. And then you have a bike swap or not on dirt for like one of the hardest climbs, in my opinion, in the whole game. And then it's then downhill in a flat for a while into a final sprint. So it was interesting. I like that course a lot personally.
Yeah, I liked it because we made it not boring. So Jen and I were really concerned that after Rooftop KOM, there's like 10 kilometers of flat before you hit the next KOM. And I was like, oh God, that's going to be boring. Like, so we were like, let's do some counters, like attack, counterattack, and see if we can get anyone up the road. And it was amazing. So first off, like I really nailed the dropping back, but man, Kristen Kulczynski had the same thing in her mind. And I literally was at 0 watts and we're both like next to each other at the start of Rooftop. I was like, oh my God, like the pack is way up the road.
Anybody take advantage of so in Zwift Racing League, because of FTS, I'm assuming most people who are watching or listening to this podcast know about segments. I'll call it segments, right? That if you want to get fastest through segment, you use the pack by slightly drifting off the back and then using its draft to get the fastest through the segment, because you'll have a lower time than everybody else because they carried you through. Plus you passed a bunch of them if you got a good kick. So climbing, like I think most
this was
people,
ridiculous though.
It was. Did anybody jump? My question: did anybody jump the front because they saw what you were doing?
Okay, this is what we will do next time, because the amount Kristen Kulczynski and I were off the back literally at 0. Like I just stopped pedaling and I was like, oh my God, if this wasn't me, I would be telling my team, frickin' drill it, because then you could get 5 riders getting FAL and you've literally dropped someone. So I was like, damn, we need to remember that for next time, that certain riders, like myself included, so you kind of have to figure out a strategy with your team. But myself included, like I was so far off the back for the first 2 ones to get FTS. And I got FTS on both of them, not winning. I think I was second and like 6th or something. But yeah, definitely a team should have taken advantage of that and just completely gunned it. But they didn't. So I caught back up, which was great. But yeah, in the 10K flat portion, it was quite cool because I went first. And I knew that last climb, like my fitness wouldn't get me through there with the top group at the moment, but I like went on this full attack. And then what was awesome was like KK chased it down, and the whole pack strung out into this long line. So everyone's pushing huge watts to just stay on wheels. I got caught. M went off. M just sprinted through the pack and did a counter. Everyone was too tired to chase or didn't want to chase. We caught her. And then as soon as we caught her, our key rider, who we wanted to go up the road, Eleanor, she went a minute, got FAL on the next climb, stayed away right through to the next climb, almost stayed away till the top of Temple, but got caught just at the top and got 3rd across the line, I think. So it was like phenomenal, like really impressive. And I just loved that it worked. You know, like that's the whole point of attack, counter attack, right? Is like attack, tire some legs, they get you another attack, tire some legs, another attack. And whatever one gets away, you know, is when the rubber band just breaks. So it was awesome. Although I saw Josh Lipka's video afterwards on Instagram where I had my attack and he's yelling at Kristen not to chase.
I saw that as well.
He's like, I didn't actually watch it. And then someone sent it to me. And he's like, oh, don't worry, it's just Anna. And I was like, oh my God. So now I'm like, okay, I got a bit of fire in the belly. I'm like, and I messaged Claire and I was like, let's work on me sticking that away. I never want to hear that again. Like, it's true though. She'll catch me easily, but man, oh, you don't like to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that as well, and I was like, oof. I wonder what Anna thinks of that one. I thought that right away. I do have a little shot here. I did a bike swap actually, and on the Temple climb, and in the pens, I hadn't done one in like a really long time, so I was like, okay, let's go practice this. And like I was like going through like how quickly can I click through to find the right bike, and did that whole thing. And it reminded me back in the day, we used to have macros where we would just push a button and it would do it for us. And people still have these, but it doesn't do everything. Like you have to still stop, push that. You know what I mean? There's a couple of things that you have to do a little bit manually, I think. I'm not sure if there's like a way to actually just one button the whole thing. Maybe, but I've
seen someone do a voice one, which did
so maybe
everything.
maybe there is a way to one. So I think the one button. So here's the thing. The macros, though, will select a bike I don't want. And so, like, I think, unless it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have to like down arrow down to the bikes that you want. You have to have like two separate ones. Because I actually swap from the Tron to the Crux over to the Venge. Because in the Venge, I want the Venge for the sprint and the fastest through the rest of the course. So, like, I had to make some very specific selections. So I just did it manually. But I got some comments. I made a little video and I posted it into the Facebook group of like my bike swap or whatever. And like, is this the fastest gun in the West? Fastest bike swap in the West or what? And like one guy was like, that's slow. I was like, ouch, dude. Like, oh man. But in my Discord, the reason why I thought it was fast is one of the guys who was kind of DSing was like, Nathan, was that a macro? What the heck? What? And I was like, nah, I'm just that good, man. Like, it was like, so, and then one of my other teammates was like, he plays Apex, dude. Of course he's got this down, like first person shooter. So anyways, it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with that one. It was a really good workout. I also had a question, and I want to answer this question for someone who is in the chat. He asked if when I use sodium bicarb, if I have more soreness or DOMs, because I can push myself that much more. And I was like, I think I've kind of got used to it. I lied. The next day, I was like, whoa, it might just be the lifting plus, but I really felt that race the last 2 days. Like,
so I'm not going to lie. I did as well. The next morning I had my second session of testing, which was only 30 minutes easy, like super easy. And the guy's like, it's just an easy session today. Just get a bit of a baseline. I started pedaling. I was like, I don't know if I can hold these watts. I was like, it's 110 watts. Like based on your VO2, this should be fine. I was like, oh my God, my legs are so achy. And he's like, what have you done? And I was like,
yeah, but like you did that the day before and you're fasted. So it's like you recovered really well. Like that's a huge recipe for like not being able to move essentially.
Yeah. He had a great point though. So he's like, what's Zwift racing? And then I told him the race, and obviously up on the big screens is like all the stats you could have. Like, so I've got what's my carb doing? Cause I'm on a ventilator thing. What's the carbs doing? What's the fat burning doing? And he's like, oh, he said something like you're purely fat burning at the moment. And I was like, oh wow. He's like, but this is where people get in trouble, because he said actually some of that is because you've used up so much glycogen store from your race yesterday that you actually don't have anything for your body to get to. So it is fat burning. So he said the problem is people sometimes go like, I'm a fat burner, like this is amazing. But it's actually like, no, you just used a lot of intensity the day before and you've inadvertently done that. So he said it was quite interesting. He said it could kind of skew the numbers a little bit to what people are actually doing. So anyway, it was a super interesting conversation.
There's different kinds of fat max, and some of them are good and some of them are detrimental. Like, especially for women, from what I'm understanding, the more reading that I'm doing and understanding across that. So anyways, that's a different topic for a different day. Let's go ahead and move on though because next week for ZRL is coming up, and next week we have a team time trial. And the team time trial is on In London, I believe greatest London flat or greater London. I always get the two. I did a glance at the schedule on which one recently, and it is greatest London flat. So we do have a little bit more climbing than you would if you stayed just in the streets of London. We do go out into the lower parts of Surrey Hills. We never climb an actual real hill in Surrey Hills, but we do a little jaunt for a moment and then back into the subways. So let's go ahead and bring in Aaron Bleakley. He's our TT specialist. Simon's here with us too. He's probably not going to say much. I think Aaron is going to be the only one speaking with us here. So no sloth.
Every time I come on, there's something weird going on with the temperature in my garage. So the last time I did TTT chat on episode 16, it was like -3 degrees. And then now it's 20 degrees outside. And I think it's like 28 in the garage. So I've closed the door.
Oh, wow.
so it's a little bit of contrast. So thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, good to see you, bud.
No, pretty much like the chat that I'm going to have today is kind of like there's some really good resources on Zwift Insider and Size Recon. And Size did a really good recon with Barney with a whole bunch of techniques. And this is kind of like trying to amalgamate all those resources just into a quick wee thing. Also, check out a few opinions, see if I can get Nathan giving me some feedback. Let me get started. So the biggest thing that's changed since the last time we spoke is 4.1.23587, whatever one we're up to.
4.1.1. We're on 4.1.1. just to be technically correct, because he is our specialist, but he's joking right now, just in case you don't know.
So they made a little bug change this week, which helped fix the left and right movement in game, and it did show to be better in the TTT that I did last night. So the main things with 4.1, we'll call it, is it is more realistic. The latest version has a little bit more of that momentum tune back in. But the main difference between the bunch racing and the TTTs is the TT bikes don't have the CDA drop at the front and back of the bunch. So
interesting. I didn't think of that before when thinking of pack dynamics.
You got a 4-rider TTT, and unless the devs had changed it since I read the response on the forums, the person at the front on the road bike gets a CDA drop, and a person off the back or a no draft gets a CDA drop, and then that helps close gaps. So when you're on TT bikes and everyone's on the same CDA, then that advantage is not there. So TT bikes are almost always faster unless you're doing out. So that's what we use for the TTTs. But just bear that in mind for later in the conversation.
So that little, okay, so then what you're saying is that little trigger that was added to 4.1 that was, or it was 4.1, 4.1, I think it was 4.1, it was added and then it was tweaked a little bit in the last update. That idea of there's a CDA drop when you go off the front, that's not there.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's more consistent, though, is what it sounds like. Everything's just more consistent. You don't have, does that mean you don't have do you still have as much trouble with pushing past, though? Like that all acts the same.
So all of the actual, as far as I can feel, and I didn't program it, is pushing past, you still need to push past the same. The biggest issue is that when you have a gap, you don't have a CDA drop. So if you get a gap beyond like 5 or 6 meters, the gaps are like real hard.
Very difficult to close. Got it.
Whereas you don't feel that, like in the ZRL race, I was in quite a tough time zone. There was some gaps and it was easier to close those gaps than what I had to do last night. So that's something to bear in mind later on in the conversation when we talk about like little tricks and tips and utilizing momentum and so forth. So given that, based off the Zwift Insider test, plus also just my experience, I still feel that pace line is the best. And if you're doing anything other than a pace line, particularly with 6 riders, you are wasting lots of watts. So even with this extra tune and so forth that's been added back in this last 0.1, it's still not entirely worth it. And would you guys agree with that? Like in your experience, Nathan, the last week when you did TTT?
So yeah, I think I've had 2 experiences so far with the new pack dynamics. One without the latest tweak, and then the other one last week I did get to experience it felt much easier in and amongst the group. And I think one thing to highlight for everyone also is that TTT, in my opinion, and everything I've experienced so far, is the place where you see pack dynamics the most, because you have to be so precise with your interactions to not waste anything. And you're with a bunch of team members who are all actually working on it with you about your placement. When you're with a bunch of strangers or just a group or just a few team members and other teams all in a big group, nobody really cares all that much. Like, we care about our own selfish interests of winning and reserving energy and all that stuff, but you're not really trying to work together about placement. So you don't get as much of a feeling of what the pack dynamics are actually doing. So if you really want to get a really good feel for pack dynamics and you haven't been paying that much attention during your TTTs, or you haven't done a TTT, I'd really suggest to the community, get into this situation, because it will really emphasize the things that we're talking about here as well. Like, and you got to get some practice around it, because you have to work together around an invisible thing. Like, it's like, you have to like, what's happening here? There's like some sort of invisible blob that's doing things to me here and there or whatever. And so, but I would definitely agree from my experience, only as far as a straight line, and a push off the front, one to the back, no echelon type thing or anything like that. Like the straight line drop all the way to the back. The one thing I would say is that sink and sprint I still kind of use it because I think I'm being a little lazy. And for me to be lazy on a technique is like to say a lot. What's I say it again?
Yeah. It's hit and miss with the sink and sprint. Like, I still prefer to do that, because I feel that when you come off the front with 0 watts, it makes it slightly easier for positions 2 and 3. But then you drop so much speed in relationship to the rest of the riders that you do need to be careful when you come back on. And that's
I did it
where
once.
that's where a little bit of the PDA.
You got dropped when you tried, Anna? You actually got dropped?
Hard dropped. Like, I did a 0 watt sink and sprint. I did a sink and couldn't get back.
Sink and drop.
So
I did a sink and drop.
Sink and drop.
Out.
So now I'm like, my strategy is like slightly ease off to say like 2 watts a kg until I'm half wheeling the last person, and then I slowly tempo it up again. That's my strategy, just a bit more safe for the people out there.
So for sure, somewhere in between the sink and sprint is the best way to go. If you lose too much speed compared to the rest of the riders, it's really hard to get back on, because you don't have that CDA drop if you happen to go too far off the back. So then all of a sudden you're having to do pull watts plus extra to catch back on, and that is quite tricky. But then if you go back too slow, then you keep on annoying people's draft, because you still get pushed slightly, or you still end up fighting for a wheel. It's technically supposed to have fixed that, but in my experience, particularly with the group last night, it was quite problematic if people went back too slowly. But the reason why we chose Paceline, even if it wasn't the best draft way of doing things, is if you're in a Paceline with a good order and you know who you're supposed to be following, then you can become more aware. And I think the key for 4.1 is awareness, just like Nathan mentioned, is that you need to make sure that you're aware of what your avatar does to other avatars. So if you push up on someone, not only are you now riding side by side and then not getting as much draft, you've also left a gap behind. And then, as we know,
can I speak to that really quickly, Aaron? Just like on this idea, I think that a lot of times people, I know for one, me, even when I know all of these facts and I'm in the middle of this effort, and you're climbing or you're like kind of pushing up a little bit, you can like, it's easy to ignore how much you might be impacting the rest of the team from a domino effect that will take place by pushing people around. Because if I do push the person in front of me in a little bit, and they then, because what's happening in that interaction, if people don't understand what we mean by push up, it means that you're coming up on a rider in the line, in the pace line, that's pushing them out of the draft of the person in front, because Zwift thinks you're fighting for the wheel that they have, and Zwift will actually create that scenario for you where you have the opportunity to try and grab that wheel by pushing more watts and getting them out of the way, essentially. And so it's trying to figure out who wants the wheel more. Like, and you don't want to be put, because then when you push them out, they then accelerate, and then they're going to accelerate into the wheel in front of them, and the whole domino effect starts where it's just out of control. And so, you know, I try not to be like, I try to be very gracious with my teammates, and we're at to the point now of awareness that most of everyone in our group will be like, I'm sorry, man. I know. Oh, I'm sorry. Like before we even have to say anything, like, oh, I really screwed that up. And like, so, and some of these teams,
I was going to say though,
yeah, go ahead.
Like the best way to create a really like interesting / pissed off team dynamic is to knock your own teammates off a draft, because they can't see anything other than they're staring at the wheel in front being like, okay, I'm on it. And then suddenly you're off and you're like, what are you doing? Get back. Like, you're ruining my race, you know?
I think some people even think it's just Zwift. I think some people just think Zwift's not working, and really it's just their teammate that's pushing them off the wheel all the time.
Because Nathan, did you
the
hear
first
what?
The first comment that people say is, I got no draft.
Yeah. Or you have someone with steering enabled like Gabby, and I'm like, turn off your steering. I can't get on your wheel.
That's another topic, and we're actually looking into that one, what's going on with that. But there have been some fixes around that. That may have been some of the bug fixes, actually, where the left-right thing was going on. So I'm really glad that they took a look at that. Play had a couple of things that needed looking. Now, one thing I do want to say also to what you said about pace lining is that I don't think pace lining is always the best depending on terrain. And my experience is that because of the new CDA decrease, sprinting through on downhills is actually even more important now than it used to be, because you can create even more of a constant slingshot from continual CDA decreases on the front as riders come through. And so it used to be just taking the speed from behind that you were gaining for free and coming through the front and then super tucking as the only rider on the front. Now, on top of those dynamics adding up in an equation, you get to add on the end of that equation a CDA decrease. We got up to almost 80K an hour in our last one on the downhill. Like it was, we were flying.
I'm going to push back on that for this course this week. So I agree.
Okay, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so I agree that for sure, if you were doing like reverse comm descent, or one of like you've got a feature and then you've got reasonable descent, you can get quite a lot of extra momentum. Why I think this week, for next week's course, because you're climbing with less draft. So Greatest London flat is not flat. Like there is very few bits which are just 0%. It's mostly 1 and minus ones. And there's a reasonable amount of 3% in there. And in those cases, if someone's pulling, say, at 400 watts, the riders behind aren't getting the same amount of draft as they would on 0%. So every time you're going uphill, you're using effort. And then if you go over the top of the hill, 4.1 will mean that the line stretches, because the way that it works now is that the first person over the rise, if they continue doing 400 watts, people are still climbing at the back of the line. So it's more realistic. So then that stretches. And then vice versa to that, when you come into the bottom of a climb, you compress. And you would have noticed that if you come into the bottom of a climb, or if you go down the descent in the underground tunnel in Waitopia, and then you hit the flat, and then everyone goes into the back of the front person. So those things happen. So when you go over the top of something, people need to have enough energy to be able to catch back on that. And then you go down the hill. And then if you want to continue doing the momentum thing, you can do the momentum thing, But unless you're a really well-drilled team who know exactly who to get back on a game, that's gap forming, then you've got to close the gaps, then you've got to hill again.
Yep.
So my advice for this course is to try and keep the pace line and keep the gaps to zero. Because if you have to keep on filling gaps, then you've got a next climb and then you're doing a descent trying to do momentum. All that's going to do is have it completely blow up before you get to the main feature of the course, which is the climb towards Box Hill, which you turn off and continue on. So,
and then it's pretty rolling though, like it's rolling through that Richmond Park part after the little bit to Box Hill, but then you take the left. I'm just looking at the map now, and I actually rode it last night in a workout, and it kind of just goes like this now until you get to that subway station, like big, 14, 15%er. The question I had, Aaron, and it's for this kind of a course, when you mention, and I know you've mentioned it before with the London courses, is everyone thinks they're just flat, but I'm way more attuned to it now, and I watch it and I'm like, oh, it does kind of just roll the whole way. Trainer difficulty. Now, I, for TTT, set this at like 20%, 30%. I usually race at 100% scratch races. So I do that to kind of smooth out the terrain. Can you give me some thoughts on that?
So if we talk about the situation that we had where you're compressing into a hill and then you're stretching over the top, if you lessen your trainer resistance, you're getting less feedback to know about that. So if everyone comes into a hill doing their draft numbers on 0%, then you go up and then everyone delays slightly and feeling the resistance and they over push, then they're going to compress more, and then same again over the top. The front rider won't know to ease back because they can't feel it as much, and then they'll keep on continuing on, get a gap to 2 and 3 normally, and then 2 and 3 have to push really hard. So my advice is, and Zwift Insider suggested as well, is to run as high a trainer difficulty as the person with the worst bike has. So if you've got someone who's got 42 tooth gravel bike on their trainer, they're going to get spun out if they're at 100%. But at worst case, everyone needs to be on the same trainer difficulty, because it's an absolute mess if you've got one person on 30% and another on 100. Because
I don't know, like the way I do it, right, is 30% for me is enough to feel a gradient shift, but not enough that I'll start really pushing on the pedals. Like, if it's 100% and you hit that 3%, like resistance kicks in and suddenly I surge. Whereas at 30%, it stops me surging. And I think some of this is like, and someone's come into chat and said like TTT is like a mystical art. But I think like, I agree with that. But I think as well, like, this is where I go by feel. And I'm like, I'm looking at the mini map to see like, okay, what gradient are we at? Where is that person in front of me? Like, we're obviously on a little like 2 to 3%. So just like back off like slightly to keep the distance with them. I always try and have like that 2 to 3 meter alert, up the top. And I feel like sometimes if people, they're just all over the show, like they're just kind of like, I'm just riding as hard as I can and try and stay on a wheel. And they forget like, oh, I just hit a hill and now suddenly I've like ramped up massively, or they're downhill. And like you said, like it's so obvious in that tunnel when everyone comes together. And I'm like, why did you do that? There's a downhill coming. Just relax and use that as recovery. I don't know. I think some of it's just like not being aware of your surroundings enough.
Yeah, so that's the key point again, is that awareness. And I still would stick with, no matter what you decide as a team, like what a team is going to have a whole bunch of riders who are going to agree on some things, and everyone needs to kind of be on board with that. So even if you disagree with what Nathan or I or you suggest, is you need to come to an agreement and then stick with that. Where it gets messy is when people aren't on the same page. So if you got someone running 100%, it is going to be different. They're going to be interacting with their trainer and avatar different than someone at 30%. So come to an agreement and go, everyone at 35 or everyone at 50. And then it makes it easier. If someone is like really going outside of what they normally use, then you can take that into consideration. So that would be like, you would need to practice this. Like if you're going to be making changes on these recommendations and you haven't tried it in the past, then that needs to be practiced though, as a team. So, but the biggest thing that I want to get with is out of all of this is awareness and gaps. Like, gaps are impossibly hard to correct, and people need to take responsibility of the wheel in front of them. And if you've got two people who aren't holding a wheel and they're riding side by side and they don't decide like pretty much instantly who's going to take the wheel, then the only way for that gap to be closed, if you're not like a super strong rider, is for the front to slow down. Or hopefully what we do in Peka Peka is we just stretch the line further back. So if there's a gap, instead of closing from the back, we close from the front. We stretch out so everyone's doing like 4 meters, and then that brings the line closer, and then it's easier for people to get on. If you try and close it from the back, you're having to do pull watts or way more to get back on. And if someone surges that, then the person behind that has to orange number, and then the person behind that is dropped. And then for the people who don't have like a massive reserve of power in relationship to the speed, that can be quite big efforts.
Yeah, okay. I want to really hammer in on that a little bit, Aaron, because that's a really good point, and I want to term it as like taking. You have to have a finesse to closing gaps because they're going to happen, right? You have to have a really. It isn't like if you just muscle the gaps that will form, you can cause more damage than what's already happening if you try to muscle that gap too much. If you try and close it through just orange numbers. I have that happen a lot where somebody like, oh, okay, I'll close it. And then like the whole team isn't aware of what's happening. Someone's just on the front like, well, they'll take care of it. They're gonna head down. And everybody's holding their spot. And then like a gap forms somewhere in the line. And then someone's like, oh, I screwed up. And then they over accelerate. And then all of a sudden, pop, 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 another domino effect happens behind rather than a slow closing that maybe the front backs off. You don't want to back off too much because you'll lose a lot of that speed and momentum that you've gained because momentum is so huge in TTT. But just a light up and everyone just does a slight shift like of a gear rather than this like over accentuated thing that suddenly causes mayhem with a bunch of other people. And then the guy behind's like, then the guy who ends up gapped because other people screwed up is like, you screwed up and caused the gap, and you sprinted because of this. No, I'm mad at two of you. Like, and it's this whole, and they're yelling that, and everybody then, and then you got the DS or your person who keeps everyone calm. There's always that one person who's like, look, everybody, let's stop fighting. And that person's like, you guys, we got to get on with it. If it's okay. Like, that person's always like, it's okay. Like, everyone's, oh my gosh, we're all in this Discord channel. People are going to kill each other. Like, and you're laughing because you've been in this experience, haven't you? Like, oh my gosh.
So with that in mind, like, gaps are going to happen. And on this particular course, I recommend, like, quite often people will have like a fixed, like, and I've recommended like fixed times that people do pulls, like 30-second pulls or 1 minute pulls or 45-second pulls. With this course, you need to be super flexible. So you need to stay as close in order as you can.
Can you say why? Why do you say that, Aaron? I want to know your reasoning there.
Because of the features of the course and the momentum changes, there's going to be times when it's going to be best for someone to ease. So if you come up to the top of a rise, you can do a swap there when the momentum's low, and then have it so that you have like use the features of the course, use the plus and minuses. I think for people like myself who really know a course like really well, it's a bit easier to DS and to ride. But there are, if you look at any of the profiles on Zwift Insider, you can see he's gone and got quite a good scale on it, which make it, you can see where there are parts. And it's always nice to have like someone lead for a particular length of hill if they can handle it, or have someone swap off earlier. So just take into consideration that, and that's why you need to practice even on road bikes in a group meetup, the course, and then try things out and then see what's going to work. Because there are a couple of places where the strong climbers, if you've got like high watts people, but there might be someone who's a particularly strong climber, can do a bit more work to help everyone out. Because you have to remember that the average speed on this course is based on how fast you can do these climbs. Because if you go down the 3 or 4%, like the one that goes down into the underneath the motorway underpass, that's, say you're going to do 65 into that. Like if you push extra hard down there, you're going to do 66. Then there's a climb afterwards, which has the little flat bit in the middle. That speed is going to determine, that climbing speed is going to determine your finish time more than what the descent speeds are. So pacing wise, you still need to be pushing quite hard up the hills and theoretically resting a bit more on the descent. So if I was to do like an individual time trial on this course, then you would use the, like Best Bike Splits tells me to do 10% above my target power up the climbs, 10% less, or even 20% less on the descents. And that's something to think of when you're pushing too hard downhill. Like take those opportunities, particularly early on, to rest, because you want to get 6 riders over the hill, because it's still 7.9 Ks, I think, from the top of the biggest feature on course to the finish, and you need everyone, in my opinion. If you drop to 4 riders, then that's a long way to go, even if they're the strongest riders.
Real quick on rider size and changing things up. I mean, this is a pretty in the high end technical, I think, planning when it comes to rider size and where they should be at any given time. I mean, but we've actually found ourselves doing this more, where our heavier riders will say, hey, they know a climb is coming, or a climb or a descent is coming up. And so our heavier riders, our riders that aren't the best climbers, they'll make their way toward the back and say, I'm taking like they might be in the rotation, but they'll be like, hey, we know this is coming up. We're going to mid. We're going to fade climb this and make our way to the back. While for us, Mogsy will go to the front and he'll just hold 6. And that's our like limiter, like around 6 or so is like, because it might put everybody else in a pretty bad spot. But then the heavier rider faded it. He didn't have to put out quite as much. And then he'll be like, I'm coming to the front, because then he's going to be the first one accelerating us with the weight on the downhill. And that's been a theme that we've actually worked out pretty well. I don't know if we'll get to the point where we plan it out for the timings, but I think in the pre-planning a little bit, they kind of think about where the first downhill is and go, you're going to go 5th or something. You know what I mean? To try and time it well, that we get that rider at that spot so that they're increasing our speed the most. And then the roll through with the lighter rider comes, and then they can hold us all the way to the top as needed. And then also I wanted to say on climbing, alongside that thing, on the other side of it, what do you think of like just having a set agreement? Like we agree that when we are climbing, we all know we can hold this wattage, about this watts per kilogram.
Yeah. And also the other thing is that although Nathan and I and Anna are like at the pointier end, these subtle things that we're mentioning, particularly with the weight differences, is very, very applicable to the D, Cs and Bs, because a lot of those teams aren't the same type of rider profile.
Yeah.
And you're going to have B males who are 100 kgs with lots of watts, and you're going to have some lighter riders within that, maybe more often than just this skinny-ish A-grade rider.
Yeah,
all kind of
that's a good point,
height.
Aaron. I remember when you DS'd me in a like mixed category race we had, and I remember distinctly, I don't know if this was like 2 years ago or something, and like there was Britt and another who were just high power riders, and it was in London, but I think we finished up like Box Hill. And I remember like a third of the way through, I'm like, I can go on the front. Like, I've got so much energy. And then you're like, no. We're burning our watts riders. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was just like, this isn't too hard. I can go on the front. You're like, no. And then we got to like the base of the climb, and it was like a spaceship taking off, and those riders just jettisoned off the back. And then the 4 of us left over had all this energy, and we were like drilling it to the top. And I was like, I get it now. Like, so it totally, I think it's even more fun and interesting with a team that's got some real distinct differences in power profiles and weight profiles. You're kind of right. In the A-cats, it's all ends up being a little bit similar, and you're really tweaking the fine tuning. But the other ones, they could get huge gains from this.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing to remember is, unlike the first TTT where you would have like particular suicide riders going into that last climb, This week, I fully recommend holding your riders for as long as you can. So that's going to feel like you start too slow. And if you're feeling like you've started too slow, you've probably done about right, because by the time you get through to the rolly bits around the back of the course, you've dealt with a whole bunch of gap filling and yelling and screaming and crying. And then you've got a hill with a couple of flat spots to regain yourselves, and then you've still got a really long way to the finish. And that's not necessarily the place to lose anything more than one rider. So pacing wise, think of that. Practice the course with your team. Like, if you're really keen on doing well on this TTT, you either have to have done hundreds of TTTs with the same people and really know them, or you need to go and practice it.
Can I ask one question, Aaron? Oh, sorry. I just got one, which was actually coming from Jen this morning when we were working through our team for next week. The way I've always worked out an order is I look at, like, I go sort of a reverse triangle. So I go like strong rider, so strong rider equals bigger pull, either length or watts. So strong rider, a bit less, a bit less, a bit less, then back to a bit stronger, and strong. So you've never got like someone who can pull 320 on the front followed by someone who can only pull 290, because they'll just get absolutely destroyed by the end. Is that the correct way to do it?
So yes, like if you're going to have someone who's going to pull 3 minutes up or 2 minutes up that climb at the end, then the person behind them needs to be strong enough. How I've ended up doing it over time is that some people don't like being on the wheel of someone else in the team. So there's a little bit of like massaging of that, of making sure that you've got riders who are not going to be in front of someone who always pushes up.
We've got that.
Because we're talking, if someone pushes up from the side, then the person who's come from behind is doing about 50 watts too much, and then they're now doing 50 watts too much. So if someone's kind of weaker, or having a bad day, then that can make the difference. So it's a bit of a mix of making sure that you don't like jettison people by having the wrong person behind each other, but also making sure that if you've ridden enough together, you know who shouldn't be behind. And then also they become more used to being behind someone and how they behave. So I always have a particular person behind me and so forth, because they know that I'm going to be pulling X amount and they can handle it, but they're also smooth. So that's something to consider, and something that hopefully the newer teams get to practice a little bit. But there's for sure, I think, Nathan not to be behind in his team.
Well, like, that's the thing is that I think is hilarious about this whole situation is that not only are we talking about the technical like physics of how this works, but also the like emotional like dynamics and personalities that come into who's interacting with who and how that needs to be managed within a team even too, which says a lot to like how much of a tribe this has become for people. You know what I mean? Like these people that they hang out with every week, multiple times a week in high pressure situations, trying to get a really passionate task done can bring out all kinds of stuff, you know, like exactly who they are starts. And then the funny thing is how it's expressed through the pedals even too. Like, oh, I know this guy, he doesn't really pay much attention to that. He pushes up all the time. And like, there's these, so great.
But you also have to remember it's a team time trial, not a me time trial. So that's where the awareness has to be. There's no point pulling beyond your pull watts on the front and leaving everyone behind, or blowing someone up who's just done a really good pull on a hill and then they've just barely got on the back, and then you're ramping it up beyond what the team wants. Like there still needs to be the communication and that awareness. And that's pretty much it. Like if you can get through with
What about starts, Aaron? What about starts? That's one thing, like I think some people don't really have a lot of different I've seen a lot of different opinions about this one. Pretty split. Like don't go like pretty black and one way or another, black and white one way or another. And I think this one like is like people think just kind of take it easy, so everybody together, and others are like go, you can gain a ton of time right now. Like, and so what do you think?
So based off physiology and years and years of time trials, there's nothing to be gained doing 600 watts for the first minute or first 30 seconds. Using that resource and then having to use your aerobic system to fix what you've just done, because you may be able to fix it short term, but in this course you're going to be out there for a long enough time that will bite you. Like, you will lose more in the back end of this course than what you gain in the first 5Ks by going too hard.
It's really interesting. So you have a really long view of that usage of energy, that like up front, that sprint is going to actually impact what you have at the end of this race. So instead of using that energy up front and getting up to speed, those couple of seconds you might gain getting up to speed is going to waste too much of the energy you could have when you're at really high speed and actually not sprinting, but maybe more doing a like anaerobic effort that is a little bit below sprinting. You're going to have more for that like final K. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. So like, if anyone's done an actual individual time trial, say a 10 mile, so 16 kilometer one, and if you've always feel amazing for like the first 3 or 4 minutes, and oftentimes before power meters, you just blow up. So you go quite hard for 3 minutes, and then you have to start paying for that aerobically, and then you have a slowdown period where the wheels fall off a little bit, and then you can ramp up it to the end. Nowadays, time trialists know not to start too hard. Like, if you watch any of the Tour de France riders starting, they're not doing a full sprint. Oftentimes they're just doing their FTP watts to start. So for TTTs, I normally just look at what people's VO2s are or their 5-minute powers are, and then just make sure that we leave the pen on average around about that. So for my guys, we leave at 450, which is less than our pools in Picker, but I know that we can group together because the game doesn't necessarily send you off nicely together, depending on trainer lags and so forth. Then we can get into a pace line faster, and we're not already straight away closing gaps. Because if you got one guy doing 600 and he's like 2 meters in front, and then and the next person orange numbers, and the next person orange numbers, and all of a sudden what is supposed to be a 450 start is now everyone doing 800 watts.
And then you're probably only gaining 2 seconds, I would think, right there.
Yeah,
like maybe.
The start of this course to the lead-in is quite hilly. So you start, and then you basically go up a hill straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a little bump, and then a down, and then an up, and then there's another down, and then a false flat for quite a while, actually. So
yeah, so if you start spending those matches early, so I look at it like I would do an individual time trial, and after many, many, many fails of pacing over the years, this is kind of like the one that is the least risky.
Aaron, I got to say that in the past, I would have disagreed with you and said speed is king, but I think you're changing my mind 100% here on the start.
Well, average speed is
Well, yeah, I mean, energy though is the higher priority in your equation about starts. That you get speed from the energy, and I would have usually said that the use of energy would have been worth it, not taking into account how much of a burn across the entire team that is happening from those orange numbers that then compounds also into what might happen because of those orange numbers, and the actual speed gains only last for a very short period of time. Because I used to be 100% on board with like, let's just orange number it. But I'm starting, you're kind of winning me over here. I might suggest, hey guys, let's go this other direction.
I think as well, if you're not like a well-oiled team, or you're a bit new to it, it could be a really stressful start for you that you mentally can't get back from either. Like, we had our first team, and like by the time I finally got and could see them, they were stressing, and it was like, it's dropped off the back, and I'm like, oh my God, if we just started calmly, like you said, you just get in your line and you just go. Whereas I think it can create a lot of stress if someone, because you have a sprinter, like you said, who can go 700 watts for us, and they're just going. And I'm like, mate, I'm dying staying with you. And this has already set a tone of, I don't like this anymore.
And you have to remember that, like, I come from XCO, like you, Nathan, and starts are incredibly important, and it's worth burning the match to get into particularly tight single track first or second. Like, that is like the biggest pacing thing in XCO, is to make sure you've got good position, and then that solves a lot of problems. But then we have to look different now, and we're looking at the interaction of, you need to be able to recover and be able to do more at the end. Like, if you get in a good position in single track, then you have the chance to recover because you're not having to pass people. You're already in a good position. So it's worth doing like 500 watts for 2 minutes with some sprints at the start in an XCO race, but it's not worth it for a time trial or a team time trial.
I'm definitely over the last year or two when it comes to team time trials, and I would say even more, even this last 6 months, and even in my coaching and understanding of bioenergetics and like this whole zone 2 revelation and just like getting much more respect of the total effort and why things are happening in that total effort. And like, I also used to approach the TTT as like, this is a workout for my over-unders. And so suffering up front a whole ton in order to get really hard over-unders, like I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And like, it hurts. And like, I'm getting a lot more satisfaction and just like enjoyment of the TTT being that high burning engine toward the end that gets the absolute best effort out of it, rather than like, I'm just suffering and I actually produce 20 less watts. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards, so I just wanted to bring up that starts thing, because I had a feeling maybe you were leaning that direction, and you've got a much better experience when it comes to total effort, I think, across time trials. I am not a time trial specialist, as you said. I am 100% a punchy XCO type rider. So I like it that you brought that perspective in.
The other thing is, like, I've been doing my training for the New Zealand hour record, which has been postponed because I moved towns, but I did an outdoor practice, and then in learning that, if I went 20 watts over a target pace within like the first 5 minutes, that makes the rest of the hour incredibly ugly. So I found that there's a very, very fine line. Like, that's an ultra steady effort that you don't have any opportunity to recover in, but it gave me an even more insight into particularly courses like this, where there feels like there's no recovery even though there's downhills. And then in the longer, and also you have to remember, you and I are out there for less time than some of these teams, so that turns into a different effort as well. So if we're doing 30 minutes and another team's doing 50 minutes, that's a completely different energy system as well within an hour effort as well. So,
that's a good point.
Have a think about it, but get everyone in your team to do a meetup, or as many people as you can. Do it on road bikes, because I don't think you can select TT bikes with draft and a meetup and have it work. And then go and ride the course and practice it, make mistakes, work out where you just need to just sort your stuff out.
I do want one last point on that, on the pre-ride of the course and why it is so important, and then we'll get going on here. But like, it's a great point that you make, that the differentiation on this course specifically, the only intense gradients are going to be the descents into the undergrounds and out in the Surly Hills. And besides that, everything is slight and almost false, but not quite false. And so because of that, it makes all of them extremely difficult with the way that they roll. And you don't get reprieve. You just get a roll. You just get this constant. And so it's a really, really power friendly course, I'll say, like a really, really like where, big watts are hugely rewarded, smooth lines, and knowing when those descents and climbs are coming that are very slight, to know how much they're going to be gaining a lot on it. So it's a really, I like that you brought that up, because all I think about on this course is the fact that we do have to climb out on the Surrey Hills a little bit. And then I get to and I'm still going to say though, that descent in the Surrey Hills, unless I'm not remembering it right, is long enough to do a couple of punch throughs. I think there's,
you can do a couple. The most important part of that course is actually the false flat at the top before the descent. So if you can get through that very, very quickly, which is why you've saved energy earlier on in the race by not starting too fast. If you can do the climb, flat bit, which goes quite fast, and then the climb again, then the top goes for a while until it goes into the descent. If you can do that top bit, there's like 4 or 5 seconds in that between your best effort and your worst effort.
Awesome. So, Aaron, who are you racing for next Tuesday? How's it all going with Zwift Racing League, and who are you practicing with? I'm not positive right now.
So, I'm doing EMEA Central. I'm with the one with all the Zwift GP teams. Like,
oh man, you've got a rough one. You've got a really, like, I was thinking about that one. I'm like, man, I wish I was racing there kind of a little bit, just because like I need some like leg tests against these guys.
Oh, dude, I was cramping in my office chair after ZRL. My legs hated me so much. So we're going to get beaten pretty well, but we've got like a solid crew of guys that I know, most of them personally have ridden a race with them. So we're all kind of bigger, taller guys with watts, but we don't have the watt per kg that a lot of those really, really good teams do. So we're just going to aim to have like a nice clean TTT without yelling at each other. I got a bit sweary the other week because I was getting a little annoyed. So if we can do that, then that's a great TTT for us. Right on.
No swearing. There's no swearing.
Yeah.
It reminds me, there's no swearing in baseball. No, there's no crying in baseball. Is there swearing in TTT?
No swear, and then no swearing in TTTs.
Yeah,
no crying in baseball.
No crying in baseball. No swearing in WTRL team time trials. That's how it works. Hey, Aaron, it's always awesome to have you on, and I hope you have a really great team time trial. And we really appreciate your insights, 100%. And we'll see you in chat because you're always hanging around. Really appreciate it, man.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, of course, Aaron. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Well, Bleakley, our TTT specialist in the community, and always all around amazing community member. It's been great to have him and his insights. I mean, he really just got a lot of respect for how much he puts into it for his team, and then also the fact he's trying, has been going for this hour record. So it's tons of background there on this topic. You muted yourself, Anna, I think. Or did I mute you? Was it me?
I muted myself. Sorry, the kids ran inside. I always like Aaron because I send him a message where I think like a quick little answer. And then I get like, I see those little dots, where they're like dot, 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 they're typing. And then like 5 minutes later, it was like, like, I was like, okay. Yep. No, that's good. But I'm quite excited for next week. I'm not going to DS because I think like I have some very rigid ideas about a TTT, and I wanted Jen to actually DS because I know she's got some really good ideas, and I just want to kind of just be instructed to do something that's out of what I think. Like sometimes I think when I'm DSing, I'm like, no one talk, like keep it calm, let's just do this. But then I'm like, actually, maybe that wasn't the right way to do it. And I think like Aaron said there is you just have to have the whole team agree, the DS come with a plan, and you just do it. And I'm like, I just want to kind of do that. I just want to be that robot there who just follows a plan.
Yeah, we need some organization. We're doing okay. I think we all kind of do go on the fly a little bit, but I got to see how I end up feeling by Tuesday too. I've raced every race. That was ZGP. Okay. I'm like, it's only 2 days later. Oh man.
Is it? Okay. So are the men and women both next week for ZGP?
Yeah, men and women both next week for ZGP. And I raced late at night. So like if it was midday, but like that's an extra 8, like that's less than 48 hours. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of like,
oh, you raced late at night for USA West.
Yeah, for USA West. So it's kind of, I'm on the, if I feel good and I'm feeling fresh, then it'll be a good kind of like tester, really oldie opener. You know what I mean? Almost. But we'll see how it goes. So OMG Smash, people are like, there's all kinds of chatter coming about this. All right, next topic. Let's go. UCI sanctioned esports calendar. What? Oh, now wait. And you put in the
Oh.
notes, think in real life points across multiple races run by different organizers. All right, I'm gonna stop acting like I don't know anything about this. So, because I've had conversations directly with the UCI, and this was talked about. Like,
Yeah.
and it was like they were like, this is something we would like to maybe do. And I'm gonna say that this is something we would like to maybe do. And then a lot of questions happened about how. Right.
Yeah.
And like the reality of how was like, there's a big, huge M on that maybe with because trying to get, and one of the things you put in here. So let's go into what that could look like quickly. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? So people get what's being brought up here.
The example that I had in my head that made it really clear for me, because I kind of read, it was an article on Zwift, and I kind of read it and it was just a bit confused. Like, I was like, what does this mean? And then I was like, it would be similar to like, okay, you've got Demi Vollering was wearing the UCI points leaders jersey all season. Now she got that because every UCI sanctioned race had some points. Now it didn't matter if it was the ASO Tour de France. It didn't matter if it was the RCS Giro. It didn't matter if it was some, Belgium race, one day classic. You got points. So it was all different organizers, but your points came together and she got to wear this jersey. So in my mind, I'm like, it's the same thing. There's like a My Whoosh, there's a Zwift, there's a Be Cool, there's a whatever, an Indie Velo. And this is bringing anyone who races across points, which then feed into a central database, and you get a sanctioned like points leader jersey based on esport across multiple platforms. That's how I kind of saw it.
Yeah, that's essentially what it sounds like. Now I'm going to step back from that just a tad, like about like what the UCI is wanting to do. I'm going to step back from that and go, why is the UCI wanting to do this? And what other ways could this happen? Because right now, like what's the best words to use here? But like right now, there's just been like an opening up of a whole space again, it feels like, because the UCI now has a relationship with Rouge, with World Championships. Zwift Grand Prix is happening, and it's kind of like, where does this sport exist? And it's like, well, obviously it exists on a lot of places. Like RGT was a place that it was existing. National championships were being run there. Zwift is a place that it's obviously existing with the largest user base. My Whoosh has been putting on their Sunday Race Club stuff. It's like, what's going on with how you gain status, I'll essentially say, on a ranking system within this space to call it a competitive sport. And I made a comment on a recent post that talked about what is the nature of sport. And I was like, well, there's a couple other things that come along with this definition that I put out there. But the definition essentially, or when we're talking about rankings and like who's who and like figuring that out, is every race happens and you figure out who the winner is. And then when you start ranking things, it's just like, who's the winners of every race, of every race, of every race, of every race, of every race. Like, it's just a bunch of races all fit into a larger, like, who's the bigger, like the most winning of all the races. And so the way the definition went, it was like, well, who's the best competitor amongst all competitions, of all sets of competitions that are out there, and how do we find that? Like, and is that the aim that we have? It seems that with this definition of trying to find a ranking system, that would be the assumption, is we're trying to find the best competitors on all sets of competitions, and however we define those sets. And so what the UCI is trying to do is define those sets for us, of like, here's the sets of competitions that are all out there that we can find a ranking system in. The question is, for the community, is what does the UCI provide that we would want them to do it?
Yeah, and by community, are you talking elite? Because this is the same thing I had. Are you talking elite?
I'm talking about everyone who. No, I'm talking everyone who. Oh, that's a really good question. That is a very good question, because participation in a space where I give my time or other sort of value to it, which could be monetary, it could be my attention, or it could be my actual effort or time or participation in some sort of way. So the community would be anyone who gives attention, time, participation, or money, or some sort of other valuable thing to make it a verified, or there's another word that I'm not coming with, no, but entity for those reasons of finding the sets of competitions. And so they would have to provide something, and that calendar would be one thing. The reason why the UCI would do this is because they have the tradition, and they have the status as the world governing body. Other places in the sport, though, don't do anything with the UCI. Lifetime Grand Prix is not a UCI event, like etc. So,
I mean, maybe I have like a bad taste in my mouth from the gravel worlds and the UCI decision to not have a live women's race. So maybe I'm coming from like a bit of a negative.
Yeah, I mean,
UCI
I'm just going to say,
but like
that's one issue within many, yes, and I'm not saying it's not a issue for sure.
No, but I mean, so I'm just preempting my response, which is
gotcha.
like, who cares? Why do we need the UCI to sanction like esports stuff? Why?
Well, okay. I'm going to try and I may agree with you, okay, but I am going to steel man the argument as best I possibly can. That look, Worlds was a big deal because those rainbow bands matter to the culture of cycling 100%, and they do have a status structure that currently is working in Europe. Okay? Like, and there's a lot of people who ride indoors in Europe in really crummy weather. And so, like, from just a pragmatist, is it going to work kind of point of view, I think in some ways, I'm not saying in the best ways necessarily, but in some ways, it'll do something that looks like cycling in sport. Whether or not the community is going to really get behind that and how much time it's going to take, there's a lot of other questions there. And could someone else, now, if no one does anything, eventually I think that's what will happen. Like probably, or eventually 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, something will grow up enough in all the different forms that it takes that the UCI will become maybe. But if somebody else or something else or a group of peoples or whatever it might be start to create a higher value statement when it comes to participation, attention, those four things that more people just get involved in and give it more efficacy, more authority in the sport of finding the best sets of competitions through a really good ranking system or whatever it might be, that entity will by de facto become the thing. And so there's two other options here. A private entity does it, or there's a community of people who create their own space of tooling and things that can get this done. Or like some private entities, Zwift, Rouge, or I don't know who, start helping the community to own part of that in some sort of way, like a USA Cycling or a governing body that's more of a non-profit type thing. I don't know, or for profit, whatever. But like that could be like, there's a space right now that's a little open that could do something in some ways that doesn't have to be Zwift or Whoosh, but there had to be a lot of motivation for it.
And I think I saw Barnsley's in the chat. So he said that having the Worlds was massive. So to represent New Zealand, oh God, no, sorry, Barnes, South Africa was epic. So yeah, he says like UCI increase the stakes. I mean, I think I'm just like, I don't like, and I work for sport organizations. I just don't like the big UCI coming and taking something that has been great and built up from the community and ruining it, and like, could you have a world championships that's not a cycling aligned world championship?
It. Like you're afraid that there might be a ruining. Like the assumption is they ruin it. I don't know. Like, is that really going to happen?
No, I'm not making assumption they'll ruin it, but like there's like I'm going to say UCI doesn't have a great history with women in sport. So I'm coming here from a point of view of like, we've just had a gravel world frickin' champs with no women's race. Like, this is bullshit. You don't give women cyclists a living wage. That's bullshit. So I look at Zwift and I look at equal Grand Prix, you've got equal number of men's, equal number of women's teams, equal prize money. We've come through. It's same, like when I raced in triathlon, everything was equal when I was there. There was a bit of work done to get to that point, but it was equal. I don't want a big entity coming in and suddenly like no one gives a shit about women's racing anymore. So I guess like that's my negativity with the UCI and what I mean by saying like a bit of that coming through over top of it. I think Zwift did a great job with the World Champs where the women's race was highlighted just as much as the men's, but that's because Zwift has done that from the very beginning. And Zwift obviously supports the Tour de France Femme of Zwift and does the Paris-Roubaix. And I just get nervous when UCI comes over.
I'm going to go then, and I'm going to say that in this space, there isn't an excuse. So they do. I'm not saying the excuse is valid. That's not what I'm saying. But you can't use the market excuse here because women's cycling is huge here. So like you just don't get to do that in a virtual cycling space. So that like I think naturally in this space specifically, you can easily grow women's cycling like through, and it's super like it's just easier without that like other side of the argument that I don't necessarily agree with. I'm not saying, but you'll see those comments come through. You'll see those justifications trying to come through. And that and so the reason I'm making that comment even is to like say, I don't see that happening because there's a good value statement for women's cycling here.
Yeah. And I guess maybe, like I said, maybe my opinion has been very like preempted by what happened last weekend. So I think, maybe ask me again.
We haven't seen that in virtual cycling is all I'm saying.
No,
I'm not even talking about the UCI. I'm just trying to like remove them from the, like that part of the conversation, even though like, because in general, like, and we've done that here as the main place that's broadcasting any esports when it comes to like, we are the hub for that in a lot of ways. Right. And we do equal coverage, and we've always done equal coverage. We've actually covered women even more. And so I think we're just setting a precedent. Do you see what I'm saying?
So maybe I think, like I said, like maybe ask me in like 2 months when I'm not so fired up about that. Because I think what I did was like, I saw that, I was fired up. I read some article
just like mad.
UCI, and I was
see
like,
the UCI. So this whole thing is actually about not seeing Gravel Worlds on Saturday because last week this was ringing. Let's talk about it. Like this was ringing in my ears last week when we got done with the podcast. And one of the last things you said on the podcast last week is, I'm really excited about that. I didn't know about that. I'm going to watch that. And I was like, sweet, I'm going to go watch that too. And then like, I went to go watch it on Saturday and I got angry. Like I was like, but it wasn't like a women's like suffrage, women's like, I wasn't there for like the women's feminist thing. Like that's a thing for sure. It was 100% selfish that I wanted to watch that race. Like, come on, give me my thing in my modern, I paid for this, blah, you know what I mean? Like totally kind of like first world problems, 100%, you know what I mean? But at the same time, right there, that's the market speaking that obviously this is exciting. Obviously this is entertaining. I'm attached now to these personalities and these riders and these teams. And now my dollar's going, what the heck? Like, come on.
Exactly. And like, just to pour like salt into this gaping wound was frickin' Kasia Niewiadoma won. She hasn't won a race in 4 years. And then she wins this and we don't get to see it. I was like, oh my God. Anyways, there's the ranting on that topic.
There's the ranting on the UCI gravel, which we weren't even like talking about that at all, but now we are because it is slightly related. And we talked about it a lot on the podcast last week. So we had to circle back on that a little bit. But okay, 3 options right now that I see in front of us when it comes to the governance of sport. Because really, this is actually about what's going on with the governance of this sport. Like that's really what it comes down to. And are there tools and resources for our the community organizers that we've highlighted a ton on this podcast, who are putting in massive amounts of work to do this, most of them for free, you know what I mean, in order to keep things going. And really an entity that has salaries behind it and a whole tradition within regular cycling would swoop in and start providing some things. I don't want to use the word, I shouldn't use negative language, because I'm not saying that there's going to be anything necessarily evil or wrong or whatever, like that about coming in and providing some sort of structure. Like somebody's got to start providing something, you know? And so the question is just who is best placed and how are the interests of virtual cycling really going to be served the best and by what entity? And is it the UCI? Is it people in the community that need to form some sort of thing somehow to start providing and work with these platforms to create the tools that are needed? I mean, Indy Velo's kind of going that direction. It feels like a community project that's kind of around that like desire that's out there, right? And then, or is it Zwift, who's the big dog, who like has been putting on these things and always in partnership with the thing that looks like it's going to be the elite thing? You know, those are some major questions to answer, like kind of right now. You know what I mean? Kind of in the next 6 months to a year. And I do think, if you haven't noticed, there's a senior management position up on Zwift's website right now. That's the competition person. So like, I wonder if they're thinking along the same lines right now.
Yeah, that'd have to be. Absolutely. Because I think the wake up call they got with Rouge and the world champs was, if we're not the mover here, we could get left behind in that space. So that's great. There's a position there, because I think if they start being the player, the mover, you know, get moving first, then
now I'm not sure. Now part of my comment though that was on one of the community members from ZGP about defining sport was like, I don't know if Zwift should be the entity that's providing the governments necessarily. Maybe. I mean, of course, for ZGP right now, because they own that. And yes, but even they're going to an outside entity. You see what I'm saying? Like you end up in a private organization that owns the roads. You end up with things where they're maybe not actually providing the certain parts of the thing. And should they provide that because other people, like, you know what I mean? So like, it just kind of starts getting where these interests are the same, but a little bit different, where we might need something else. And that's where the UCI might provide something, or perhaps a coalition of group organizers. I mean, one thing I would say though, is that we need the tools for this right now. We need the ability for event organizers to start doing something with this space in ways that are tooled up and able to go to provide the best, awesome events out there that maybe have some governance around them. You know, verification, there's so many questions to be asked there. And like, that's another thing is like, well, the UCI going to start providing verification? Like what does that look like? Do you have an account with them then that's paid for so that justifies verification? You know what I mean? You start getting into some really big, like lots of in the weeds questions in order to actually govern this space really well. Because we're not just talking about P-tests anymore for whether or not you're on EPO or whatever the heck it is. Now we're talking about other levels of stuff that we've had conversations about for 7+ years. I was at a local bike shop at one point trying to connect, because Zwift used to have a program where they would connect to local bike shops, get their setups in there, and they would be on the ground with all of them. And I was looking to get connected to those setups. We're talking 6-7 years ago, and help set up verification processes locally. And then when we saw locally enough energy around that, start setting up esports events actually in those areas. And so like, this has been this is like a longer conversation, but it's coming more to a head now, it feels like, because of the entrance of UCI, Rouge, etc. in the last 2 to 3 years. So yeah, anyways, there's my...
That got us fired up. Yeah,
I'm super fired up.
I'm fired up, not so sure about this, but yeah, anyways, we can move on.
I'm excited. I'm actually excited because I like it. I like that there's forward momentum, because if these questions are out there, it means that things are happening. You know what I mean? And and it's like, okay. And maybe there'll be a letdown moment, but I think we have forward momentum.
I think it's good. I think it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Okay, cool. All right. Other things. Here we go. Zwift Clog, Zwift Click, and the new Zwift Hub One. We got some super promo-y. Like these are the new Zwift Hub One, introducing virtual shifting. Get your Hub One bundle, 1 year Zwift membership in the link. The link's not even, I got to put the link in the in the live stream, but you will have a link, everybody. I'm putting it in right now. I'm saving it. But yeah, this is pretty cool. I absolutely love it. I actually have a cog right here in front of me right now. This is what they look like. Bam, there's a cog. And it just like the hub body.
Oh, I see.
So if you're upgrading so that you can upgrade, or you can buy a Hub One and it's already installed, but you can also upgrade your current hub because the virtual shifting is actually exists in the hub itself with the update that comes. So there's an update.
Do you
Go ahead.
attach that to your bike? Hold it up again. Does that click onto your cassette
this goes,
or not?
Yeah, so it's just like, it's got pulls right there, just like a...
okay, cool.
Yeah. So then you remove the hub body and plug this in, put the screw over the top, and it just acts like a hub body. It's pretty cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And now the question I know that a lot of people are going to have, and that clicks cool, but you can use your, I was right. Remember when I said
you were right, and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. You said it, and I was like, I'm just going to be quiet. You were 100% right. So the buttons, those little buttons, the bias buttons on the sides of the plays, they act as shifters. And I wrote that actually in, I should quote you in the article actually. I wrote it in the article on ZCL's website that you actually were right. And I said, oh, those nifty little buttons on the side that go up and down with your trainer difficulty, they're actually for virtual shifting too. So
yes, I'm so glad I got that right. And I can see though why you would have the click too, because my plays, sometimes I'd want the virtual shifting like a little bit in a different position. So I quite like that you can get the click as well. But the question that's going to come up, and you're not going to answer for me, I know, is I don't have a hub. I have a Wahoo kicker, but I want that on my Wahoo kicker. And we talked about it last week or the show before about Zwift and Wahoo becoming a bit more friendly and aligned. Please, I hope. And I saw it in Zwift Insider's article because he covered it too, that there is talks or it could happen. Like it sounded positive that you will be able to buy this to put on a trainer that isn't a Zwift hub, which would be amazing.
There was little hints at it, wasn't there? That might be able to happen. We'll see. I'm not like there was hints, but I don't know if that's like I think that's a desire. I think that it isn't like anyone's trying to hold that back or anything like that. I think it probably would be more of like, okay, where's the resources? What can we focus on? That's what I was sensing there. So I don't think that there's any like, we want to like block the market or dominate the market or anything like that. I think it had a lot more to do with like, where can resources go and what can we do and who's willing to work with us and how. It's a complicated topic, And so it seems though that, I mean, on that front right now, we have a lot of people really working well together. You know what I mean? In this space, obviously. So I think it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's cool. And everyone in chat has come through saying it sounds really exciting. So I think it's a great little hardware development. I think, kudos, good job. It's kind of perfect, really.
Yeah, and then also just as another thing with that, you can still get a Hub Classic, and you can still use virtual shifting on the Hub Classic. If you wanted to get a cassette still with your hub, you can get a Hub One, or you can get a Hub Classic. There is a bundle that you can get a click. So you get some extra hardware besides a cassette then that you can kind of use forever. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of uses for it. The one thing I got to say is using it on the mountain bike was so awesome. And being able to just plop my S-Works, bam, there you go. It's just done. And like ride my mountain bike and then just put my road bike on and then just put my mountain bike. I mean, all I had to do was change a little dropout thing, like a little piece of metal, swap it, and that was it. And I was good to go.
Do you think this is going to undercut the smart bike market a little bit? Because there were two reasons. There were two reasons I want a smart bike, and this fixes one of them. One is just the general bulky stability of a smart bike, that when you're sprinting or doing efforts, it's just rigid. And like when I trialed the Stages one, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can like sprint and do stuff. And then the second reason was virtual shifting and being able to shift bikes on and off. So I'm like, why why would I spend $7,000 New Zealand to get a smart bike, whereas now I could get, hopefully in the future, a hub and a click, or just the hub with my plays. I don't even know how much a hub is. What, $100 or something?
So good question here. I'm just gonna
Oh, not
and
the
that's
hub.
a good-
Sorry, the what's it called? That thing. Cog.
the cog. Yeah, and I'd agree with you there on the like that it doesn't answer having a really stable platform necessarily, right? Comparatively.
Yeah.
But that was one of the main points was like just a trainer doesn't take as much space. It's not as much of an investment compared to a smart bike, all those kinds of things. And you get the virtual shifting out of it and you can easily swap between. Where a smart bike, a lot of the answer is just the same. You can have multiple people. It's always ready to go. You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. But now I really liked that I could get the pedal stroke and the hand position and my body position for my main racing, which was mountain biking, done very easily. Right? And like not running out of gears on the mountain bike, that was huge. So huge.
There's a question that's come in that is interesting. So if you've got, like, say, a Wahoo kicker like I do you need the cog, or could they just do a software
but if they share the protocols, the protocols with Wahoo and give them the virtual shifting that interacts with Zwift, then
you just keep it in one
yes.
gear.
But that's a good question. So the hub though, not your Wahoo, but if we're talking about a hub that you own, yes, you can use your cassette in one gear and leave it there.
Oh no. So then you could essentially, if they share the stuff, just do the same with the kicker. Just keep it in one gear.
Then you have virtual shifting. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
You don't actually need to go buy the cog.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Well, that's my dream.
Now, the cog's main function is that it reduces the noise level. It keeps it in line, and it's no wear and tear in your cassette, right? Like there's a bunch of functions that the cog has where you can easily get bikes on and off instead of having to always swap a cassette, because then you have to use whatever cassette do you see what I'm saying? So there's a whole bunch of things that this cog solves that has more to do with ease that the smart bike would bring versus a bunch of, like, one of the things I wrote in the news article we released was like, I don't got to get my hands messy anymore and be torquing on something in the freaking pain cave besides my legs.
What? What are you doing down there?
Torquing. Oh my gosh. Anna, it's definitely Friday night. I'm not twerking on anything in the pain cave. Oh my gosh. But no, seriously, I find myself on the ground, like, messing with the chain cassette tools, and you know what I mean? It's like it's an extra 10 to 15 minutes that instead it's as easy as swapping a rear tire, even easier probably than swapping a rear wheel. Like, just boom, boom, that's it. So I think that's the main sale with the cog. I really like the click because the buttons on it they're really soft, actually, like super soft and like comfy, and it felt easier than AXS, actually. Like my MTB AXS electric, is really, really easy. I love it, actually. I absolutely love it. And this was even more like, wow, that's just simple.
Okay.
Boom, 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 boom.
That could be cool.
Yeah. So I really like, and I also like that I could put it anywhere that you can mount with these little, you know these little rubber bands you use on Garmin's, like Garmin mounts and everything. Well, the mounting function of it is built in, so you can just mount it anywhere. Right? Like,
awesome.
So
cool.
Yeah, super cool. Like really well thought out design when it comes to like human experience. I don't know what you call that, like tactile design, like how I interact with something physically. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
So there you go. Yep. Virtual shifting, Hub One, and the click and the cog, and now an upgrade to your plays as well. Remember to update your firmwares, everybody, and you have to be outside of Zwift. I think some people don't understand this. They're like, it won't update, and they're mad at blah, blah, blah. And it says, there's a little warning. You have to be outside of Zwift so that your companion app isn't connected to Zwift while you're updating your hardwares. So make sure that Zwift isn't open, and then you can update your hardwares through the companion app. All of your hardwares are updated through the companion app. So if you have a Hub One, or the click or your plays, when you need a hardware update, you do it through the companion app with Zwift closed. There, just as a heads up, everyone, because that's a really crucial one. Because I've seen a lot of people. I think I've seen quite a few comments that were struggling with that, but didn't know they were struggling with that. If that makes sense. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, workout of the week, sprint technique. This is a long one. We went on for a long time.
I know. I did actually put notes that we kind of did do a workout of we did do a coach's corner, I think, with Aaron with TTT. So let's move sprint.
Okay, we'll do that. Good call.
Next. We'll do that next time. Yeah, because we did do a huge amount on TTT.
And then we can save the workout of the week for next week and everything. It takes a little work off our plate, just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. We'll save that for next time because we cover the TTT. We don't usually have a guest on anymore, so it was good to have Aaron.
Look, we have a new background for the fashion in the field. Look at this.
Ooh.
We're hanging out in New York for the fashion in the field here.
Yeah.
It's looking good. It's got lights on it and everything, like coming out of New York lights.
Up to game. She sent me some of the she was like, I should be a Zwift photographer. I was like, yeah, you're taking some good snaps lately. So yeah, good job on these. What
are you rating this? Where'd this come from? The Flamme Rouge.
Okay,
this is from the event organizer, right?
Yeah, so it came from Rowena from NZ Bro, who sent this to me and was like, can you feature this? I was like, ooh, not only will I feature the jersey, but this is what I was talking about. Look at, so those people listening, there is 3 colors everywhere on this. A touch of a markdown on the right-hand bike choice where there's a little bit of yellow, but red socks, white shoes, white gloves, red and white helmet, and then the Flamme Rouge kit, which is quite cool. So it goes alongside. I didn't even know they had this in game. It might be new. I would assume you unlock it by doing the Flamme Rouge events, which are still going. Actually, I've seen some going. Yeah, awesome kit. I'd give this a solid 7 to 8. Oh, 7.5 then. I'll give it a 7.5.
Yeah, I'll go a little more. I'm going 8.5. I really like this kit. I don't know why. I like the fade in the back, especially even what's even cool. So I like how the pattern goes with it, with the red to white and all that, and it kind of makes each part of it pop, especially if you do the helmet the way she's done and the socks. But then because the back also has a fade that changes a little bit, I like that as well. So I'm going to up it a little bit for me, because otherwise I'd be like at 7.5, 8, but I'm going to give it 8.5. Solid kit.
Nice. Okay. That's really solid.
And I like it that it fits, I don't know, something about the road feel to it too. It's got speed written all over it. It's got speed written on it. So
yeah, which is the vibe of Flamme Rouge is just
totally,
full speed. So.
Totally.
There we go.
Mike Henry is letting us know. He gives us 8. Let us know what you think in chat. We'd love to hear what you think about the kits as well as your ratings for them. If you, maybe we'll get a community rating as well going. We had that a little bit on Instagram. We backed off a little bit.
I used to do it. I know. I just you know me in social media. I'm like,
I get it.
Oh man.
I totally get it.
I'll try and do it again. But yeah, jeez.
So what's coming up for the next week? You've got more fasted testing, I'm assuming.
Oh, dude, the fasted stuff's killing me. It's not so much the food, it's the coffee. Man, I need a coffee in the morning, and all the tests are at 7 a.m. But I've got 2 hour-and-a-half hard workouts to come, and then 1 hour-and-a-half or 2 hour just endurance ride. And then what's kind of problematic is for the first one, he was like, oh, can you tell me what playlist you want? But whatever you pick, we've got to have it for every single time to keep it consistent. Because obviously if there's pumping music and then 1 week not pumping music, it can affect the results. And so I was like, oh, I don't know, pop, just something with a beat. And I
you chose something that's not.
I just said pop, whereas actually what I would prefer would be more sort of Testo or
Ellie Goulding,
Calvin Harris, that
totally.
I just didn't think of that. I was just pop.
Yeah. That late 2000s techno vibe that had a lot of great women's tones over it.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So yeah, see ya, that kind of stuff. But now I'm stuck with this. He was like, "Oh, cool. I'll just make a playlist from Taylor Swift."
Yeah, I
was
knew
like,
you were gonna
"Oh,
say that. I knew it was gonna
no,
be a Taylor
oh."
Swift playlist. Oh man.
And I was like, I don't even listen to Taylor Swift. Like her music's fine. Like if it's on the radio, I just like,
yeah, but like to
hear
be
it.
to be going 1 to 2 hours, and now
Suffering.
because you have to have the
Oh,
same playlist, you have to
I
listen
know.
to the Taylor Swift playlist for every fasted,
I
annoyed
know.
ride already. You're
Yeah.
already like
And I'll
in the
sit there, yeah, and be like, this is so shit. I actually first off asked, like, could I just have a podcast? Because I'd like actually find that interesting. Like when it's hurting, sometimes I like just the sound of people talking. And he's like, oh no, we'll get something more motivating. And now I'm like left with this. I'm like, because it's the Taylor Swift playlist, it brings in like country music, which could not be any more demotivating sometimes. Just slow, chill. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing next week.
But you only have to
but
do
I
2 more of those, right? So we're only 4 more hours of your life or so that you have to give to that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what's worse, no coffee or this freaking playlist. But now, yeah, this weekend, I've got a great weekend. Tomorrow, I've got actually quite a hard workout. So if anyone is on Zwift, sort of evening America time, midday New Zealand, Australia time, or midnight UK, if you feel like a late one, I've got quite a hard workout. That's an hour and a half. So yeah, come join me if you see me on Zwift, or tune into my Twitch because I'll probably need a lot of help to get through that one.
And you have been doing some pretty cool group like stuff as well. But this was one where they just jump in with you and do this workout specifically
that's
for
my
ZGP?
No, this is my athletes. So those are my like triathletes. Every Thursday evening New Zealand time, we jump in on a workout. But yeah, and then Sunday long gravel ride. So we're going to do up tempo kind of gravel thing for probably like 4 hours. So
Oh wow,
yeah, big weekend.
That is a big weekend. That's huge.
Yeah. What about
you? I'm on rest week. Like I just put it in as soon, and so today was the first day that I actually went back into pressing the pedals in any kind of like semi-serious way. So it was just like mid-low zone 2, nothing too super serious in that. And I've also hit the gym a little bit. And then as soon as I'm kind of like, yeah, my body's ready to go again, I'm focusing in on sprints. To get ready because ZGP is just massive amounts of crazy sprints a lot of times when it comes to like VO2 into sprints. So I'm really trying to get my, ATP quick anaerobic activations coming on. And then I'll probably be doing a VO2 or some sort of like threshold effort before, like probably one of each sometime before ZGP. Whether or not I throw a kiss race in on the weekend, or if I'm not going to be quite recovered enough for that. I should be. So we may do kiss racing this weekend or something else along those lines. But I'm kind of like, I've used racing enough over the last like 3 weeks, because I was kind of just doing like really hard racing efforts and then a bunch of zone 2 because I didn't want anything structured in my intensity space really. So now I'm like, okay, it's time to take the intensity a little more seriously maybe, and like really focusing on something that's going to be good for Richmond. It's going to be good for Alpe Zwift. Like I'm thinking about that Alpe Zwift race and I'm like, yeah, maybe you should go climb on Zwift for a while for some full gas efforts, for like threshold efforts,
And at 100%.
Yeah, exactly. That too. And I've also put my battery in on the front end of my front derailleur because I probably actually have to use my front derailleur now.
Nice.
So that's what I'll be up to. So anybody wants to join, I'm also going to be live on Twitch. I got some pretty cool stuff happening for ZGP as well. I'll be streaming that. And next week we'll announce what team I'm on because a lot of people have been asking. So we'll see how that goes.
Cool. Exciting.
I haven't gotten the only reason I haven't said anything, you guys, is because I want to do it. It's not like I'm not even trying to build anything. I'm just like a hype or anything. I just want the kit. You know what I mean? I just want to be like, here I am in the kit. You know what I mean? Like the team I'm riding for. Like, so yeah, that's what's happening. I think nothing with in real life though. There's some in real life stuff coming up, but we're kind of on the edge of it or not. So
okay.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. that has been episode number 65. As always, you can find these podcasts over on ZwiftCommunityLive.com on the podcast tab, or download it anywhere that you do download your podcasts. Make sure to search Zwift and the Wrap. It should come up real quickly. We've been live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Make sure to hit those follow buttons, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Leave a comment. We will try and get back to them or bring those comments and questions into the next podcast if we can, or schedule some sort of topic for a future podcast. We definitely read them, and we love all of your interaction with this. Thanks everybody for tuning in. For me and Anna, we'll see you next week for episode number 66. And as always, ride on.
Yeah.